Welcome to our Week 6 college football picks. As you can see from the camera in beautiful Santa Barbara, doing things a little bit differently. We're going to focus on the view this week and also focus on making correct picks. As always, we'll start with an upset pick of the week. Two games jump out, like both of them, so I'll mention both. SMU at Houston, the Cougars 6.5-point home favorites. The Mustangs have the better offense, but Houston's defense has been terrific to start the year. But I like SMU. Watch out for the Mustangs. Chad Morris, the former Clemson offensive coordinator, a rising young coach. If anything happens to someone at A&M, maybe Chad Morris goes there. I like SMU and Chad Morris here. The main upset pick of the week, the one I like the most out of the two, Duke goes into Charlottesville. Virginia, a 2.5-point home favorite. Duke opened as 4-point road favorites, but are now almost a field goal underdog here. Duke's only loss came to Miami last week, 31-6, but the game final score wasn't indicative of it. Miami had 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter to kind of make the score larger at the end. Virginia 2-6 against the spread in their last 8 games, whereas on the other side, Duke is 11-5 against the spread in their last 16 road games. I like Duke to win this one. Moving on to our main picks of the week, we'll start with a terrific matchup. West Virginia travels to Fort Worth to play the Horned Frogs. TCU, a 13-point home favorite. These two teams played a terrific close game in 2014, but the last 2 years, the winner has won by 24 plus. Will Greer on the year, 13 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. Justin Crawford, the running back for West Virginia, has run for over 100 in each game. The high-octane offense of West Virginia could cause concern for TCU. But the problem for West Virginia does still lie in that Tony Gibson defense. They allowed 564 yards to Kansas in their last outing, and they're averaging 226 rushing yards allowed a game, which doesn't bode well in this type of matchup because TCU is led by a strong running game, and their defense prides themselves on stopping the run. That'll be a big matchup as that run defense goes against Justin Crawford, the talented running back for West Virginia. Spread trends, West Virginia 1-4 against the spread in their last 5 versus a team with a winning record. West Virginia has won their last 3 games coming in by an average of 33. And one thing to keep an eye on here, TCU, this is a team that was good back when they beat Ole Miss to win the Peach Bowl. But since then, they haven't quite been the hunted. This is Kenny Hill. Most of these TCU players weren't starting or playing prominent roles on that TCU team that won the Peach Bowl. So this TCU's team, this is their first time being the hunted. How do they respond to somebody coming after them from the moment the game starts? Nonetheless, I like TCU to win this game because they can run the football against a porous West Virginia run defense, and because I think they slow Justin Crawford down. Don't stop him, but they slow him down. I like TCU, but only by 6 in a competitive game in Fort Worth. Moving on, Penn State is a 13.5-point favorite. They travel to Evanston to play the Wildcats of Northwestern. Northwestern won the last 2 matchups in 2014 and 2015. But that was before Penn State and James Franklin got rolling again. Northwestern, you would imagine against a team as talented as Penn State would probably have to play from behind a lot of the way. That's going to negate Justin Jackson. A lot like Wisconsin got up big heading down the stretch last week. Justin Jackson only had 9 attempts for 25 yards last week. That's going to put a lot of pressure on Clay Thorson throwing the football. And on the year, he only has 7 touchdowns, but he has also thrown 5 interceptions. So keep an eye on that. If Penn State gets the lead, a lot of pressure is going to be on Clay Thorson. I don't think that bodes well necessarily for Northwestern. Northwestern on the year has wins over Nevada and Bowling Green. They have losses against Duke and Wisconsin, but they did look better against the run a week ago. Penn State 4-1 against the spread on the road over their last 5 road tests. 12-2-2 over their last 16 overall against the spread. As I've mentioned before, I think Penn State, they get off to a nice early lead, Clay Thorson's going to have to throw the ball a lot to keep Northwestern in it. Don't think that bodes well for the Wildcats. I like Penn State, Trace McSorley, Saquon Barkley, a good defense. Penn State by 17 in Evanston. Moving on now, Wake Forest at Clemson. The Tigers, a 22-point home favorite. Coming off a big win over Virginia Tech. We'll get into that in a second. Just a note, Clemson has won 8 in a row for the series, and they won last year by 22 points. Wake Forest was tied with Florida State last week with under a minute to go. The Noles would eventually win the game. Wake's defense allowed only 270 yards against Florida State, and Wake quarterback John Wolford played one of the better games of his career a week ago. For Wake Forest, the offense is statistically average. The defense is a top 30 ranked statistical defense. They allowed just under 14.4 points per game. They've played well, but I don't think they've quite played anybody on this level like Clemson. Meanwhile, Clemson going back to last week against Virginia Tech. Tigers forced 3 hokey turnovers a week ago. The offense, though, many people have been raving about Kelly Bryant. Yes, he played well, but he isn't quite setting the world on fire throwing the football. I like him more for his legs at this point, actually. They throw a lot of the back shoulders to Kane and a lot of deep balls. They had only 186 passing yards last week against Virginia Tech. That's something to keep your eye on if you're watching ACC and Clemson. Can Kelly Bryant and this offense take the next step passing the football? If that happens, Clemson becomes a prohibitive national championship game frontrunner. But can they take that next step? Even if they don't yet take that step, Clemson has an elite running game. The defense extremely talented on all 3 levels. Wake Forest 6-1-1 against the spread in their last 8 conference games. Dave Clawson's starting to get things turned around. He's known as a program builder in college football, starting to build Wake Forest up a bit. He doesn't build them up to a win here. I think Wolford does enough for the Wake Forest offense, gets them a few points. Clemson wins this one, but only by 20. Moving on, Georgia goes into Nashville to play Vanderbilt. The Bulldogs of Georgia, a 16.5-point road favorite. Vandy won by a point last year in a game that had many Georgia fans feeling restless. But the prior 2 years, the Bulldogs did win both of those 2 games by 17 plus. A week ago against Tennessee, Jake Fromm was 7 of 17 passing. As much hype as he's starting to get as a young quarterback, 7 of 17 is not quite where you want to be if you believe Georgia is an SEC title contender amongst the likes of Alabama and Auburn. If you think Georgia's on that level, Jay, you're going to need more out of the passing game than Jake Fromm in terms of a more consistent accuracy standpoint. Georgia's defense held Tennessee to 142 yards a week ago. It is a challenged passing Tennessee offense, though. But also for the year, Georgia has not allowed more than 19 points in any individual game. This Georgia team really reminds me of Alabama when Nick Saban started getting the Crimson Tide rolling. This is a deep Georgia defense that has a lot of depth, and they have athletes that are talented pretty much everywhere on that defense. Add in they have 3 really good running backs in Nick Chubb, Sonny Michel, and DeAndre Swift. And Georgia gets the job done running and with their defense, a lot like those early Nick Saban teams that Bama did. Vandy is playing their 4th straight game against a ranked opponent. That's something I think you want to keep an eye on. They lost to Florida a week ago by 14. And in that game, they struggled mainly on 3rd and 4th downs. If you look at it, that could be a sign that this defense is starting to wear down. A brutal 4-game stretch. This is the last of those 4. But is this defense fatigued? Do they have enough in the tank to slow down a Georgia team that likes to pound you with the football, running the ball? Remember, Bama ran 91 plays against them. Florida ran 77 a week ago. If that defense is fatigued, it doesn't bode well in this matchup. Another statistic I like that favors Georgia. Georgia 5-1 against the spread in their last 6 overall games. Also, they are 4-0 against the spread in conference and 5-0 against the spread on the road. All in all, I like Georgia. The defense, along with the running game, Vanderbilt wears down as the game goes on. Georgia pulls away late. I have Georgia by 23. Moving on now, Ole Miss heads to the Plains to play Auburn and Jordan-Hare. The Tigers of Auburn, a 21-point home favorite. Auburn won by 11 a year ago, and that was back when Ole Miss was on a little bit more stable footing as a program. Chad Kelly was quarterbacking, and Hugh Freeze was coaching. The Rebels had 253 yards against Bama last week. And coming into this one, Ole Miss also has the 130th ranked rushing attack. Shea Patterson has also thrown 5 interceptions the last 2 weeks. Doesn't bode well offensively for the Rebels. On the other side for Ole Miss, defensively, they've allowed 430 yards per game, and they rank 117th against the run. An Auburn team that likes to establish their offense by running the football to set up Jarrett Stidham play actions. That porous Rebel run defense probably poses a big problem here. Auburn rolled past Mississippi State a week ago, and don't look now, but Jarrett Stidham has been lights out over the past 3 weeks with only 12 incompletions. Auburn has a strong running attack. We've mentioned before a porous Ole Miss run D. Auburn also, on their defensive side, ranked 9th nationally in total defense and 5th against the pass. Ole Miss is 1-10 against the spread in their last 11 overall. All in all, everything pointing towards Auburn. I really like this Auburn team. I think they're starting to roll, probably towards big matchups in November against Georgia and Alabama, both of which will be at home. Auburn in this one continues to find their gears. I have Auburn here by 30. LSU goes into the Swamp to play Florida. The Gators a 3.5-point home favorite. This one opened at Florida as a 6.5-point home favorite, but it's been moved down to 3.5. Florida won by 6 a year ago in Baton Rouge on a goal line stand at the end. A lot of bad blood between these teams over what happened last year. The game supposed to be played at the Swamp, moved to Baton Rouge. Florida not happy about that. LSU statistically has a nice defense. But over the last 3 games, the Tigers have allowed 404 yards per game and 29 points per game. And they're coming off an embarrassing loss where they fell behind 17-0 to Troy. The Tigers had 4 turnovers a week ago. Their offense statistically below average. But again, as we mentioned, they do have a top 35 defense in virtually every category. That fact that they had that top 35 defense makes the struggles they had, especially last week against Troy, rather shocking. It just seemed like this was a banged up defense, and they seem they don't have a lot of depth. I think the injuries they've added kind of hurt them a bit against Troy. Meanwhile, can Florida do what Troy did? You would think they'll at least try, since they had over 200 rushing yards against Vandy. Malik Davis starting to establish himself as a talented young running back for the Gators. LSU struggled at the point of attack. They gave up 206 to Troy. Florida going to exploit that, but no Luke Del Rio. Felipe Franks going to have to prove he can make the right decisions against an LSU secondary. So as we said, Tigers banged up. But they're starting to get healthy at the right time. And something I don't think you can kind of measure is what happened last week against Troy was embarrassing. And for the Tigers, their back is going to be against the wall coming in. But this is an LSU team that only has the 1 conference loss to Mississippi State. They're not out of it by any stretch of the imagination yet in terms of an SEC race. They have a lot to fix to be in that race, but psychologically they're not out of it. Their back's against the wall though, and you have Coach O hired because many think he's one of those master motivators in college football. He'll get his team ready to play. He's going to play that card that it was embarrassing a week ago and that everybody has written them off. I like LSU to come into a heated rivalry game with something to prove, fired up to play. I think LSU's defense shows up, offense does just enough. LSU in a shocker in the Swamp, Tigers by a late field goal. Moving on, Alabama heads to College Station. The Crimson Tide head in as a 26.5-point road favorite. But an interesting side note is that only once since Texas A&M joined the SEC has Alabama won this matchup by more than 20 points.
Again, they're a 26.5-point road favorite. A&M has looked improved since its collapsing against UCLA in week 1. The rushing attack ranks second in the SEC, 255 yards a game. Travion Williams, Keith Ford, and Kellen Mond at the dual threat quarterback helping out that run game. Can he do enough, maybe with some RPOs, to keep this one close? Might really be A&M's only shot, is get Bama moving outside the tackles with Kellen Mond. Bama's defense is not as deep as it's been in years past. A veteran secondary. I think, honestly, Alabama's secondary, probably the most talented aspect of this defense. On the line, Deshaun Hand out probably for a month, probably would return for the LSU game, but no Deshaun Hand here. Linebacking core has experienced injuries, albeit they're very talented, but they're also very young. Definitely think Bama wins this one, but I think they pull away late. Not by 26, though. I like Bama probably in the teens. Moving on now, Kansas State heads to Austin. They'll play the Texas Longhorns. Texas, a 4-point home favorite. These teams have alternated wins since 2012, with Kansas State winning last year's matchup in the Little Apple. Kansas State beat Baylor a week ago, rebounding from their loss to Vanderbilt, against a Vanderbilt team that doesn't look all that good right now. The offense of Kansas State is predicated on a strong rushing attack, as Jesse Ertz is more of a dual threat guy. I think if Kansas State has their optimal situation, it'd be more running than passing, as their passing game ranks 104th in the country. Texas's defense has improved since the Maryland disaster, however, as they have not allowed more than 17 points in regulation of any game since week 1. Also something a lot of people saying, well, Texas's run defense isn't good. Kansas State's going to pound them. They like running. Texas not a great run defense. Texas didn't have a great run defense in the Maryland game, but on the year, Texas is ranked 17th nationally at stopping the run. That's a little hidden fact a lot of people don't really realize. Texas defense has maybe turned a corner a little bit. They continue to struggle a little bit against the pass, but that's not exactly Kansas State's MO. I think that bodes well for them here. I like the Horns at home by a touchdown. I think Texas is able to stop the run game of Kansas State, or at least slow it down, force Jesse Ertz to make some throws. Don't think he does it. I like Texas, a low-scoring game, probably 20-14 Texas. Moving ahead, Wisconsin heads to Lincoln. The Badgers, 11.5-point road favorites. The Badgers have won 4 in a row in this series. Wisconsin averaging over 40 points a game, largely due to a very efficient rushing attack. Their defense also allowing under 14 points per game. Nebraska has looked good the last 2 weeks, but I think that is more of an indictment on how bad Illinois and Rutgers are. Still have a lot of questions about Nebraska. Against the spread statistics here, Wisconsin 7-0 against the spread on the road over their last 7 road games. Nice little streak for them. Nebraska is 1-5-2 against the spread at home over their last 8 games. Badgers are the better, more proven football team coming into this night game in Lincoln. I like Wisconsin here by 2 scores. Virginia Tech heads to Chestnut Hill to play Boston College. The Hokies, a 16.5-point road favorite. The Hokies have won 2 in a row in this series, including 49-0 a year ago at home. That might motivate Boston College a little bit coming into this one. Will it matter? We'll answer that in a second. Josh Jackson wasn't great against Clemson, but really, which quarterback has been? Not even Lamar Jackson looked good against the Clemson defense. The Hokies did hold Clemson to 332 yards, and the Virginia Tech defense ranks 27th nationally in yards allowed, while allowing just under 15 points per game. Boston College played well defensively a week ago, but they still rank 91st in total yards and 123rd versus the run. That could be an issue against Virginia Tech. Boston College is going to have to score to keep it close, but their offense ranks 118th nationally in scoring. I like Virginia Tech, motivated off of last week's loss to Clemson, still very much in the running for an ACC championship game berth. A motivated Virginia Tech team, Justin Fuente, Josh Jackson, I think come ready to play. I like the Hokies here by 23. Moving ahead now to our final three predictions. We'll go with Miami at Florida State. Hurricanes a 3-point road favorite as they head into Tallahassee. Florida State has won 7 in a row in this series. And with the Noles struggling early to start this season, it feels like now or never time for the Canes. Malik Rozier looked good against Duke last week, as did the defense, which held Duke to 6 points. Pressured Daniel Jones a lot. Miami averaging 517 yards a game on offense. Florida State's defense will definitely have to play a huge game here if the Noles are going to have any chance, because their offense ranks 119th nationally in yards per game. Miami is 5-0 against the spread in their last 5 conference games. I don't think Miami will roll the Noles, but I do like the Hurricanes by a touchdown. Moving ahead now, Washington State at Oregon. The Cougars head on the road. Oregon, though, is a 2.5-point home favorite. Washington State is coming in off of its first win versus a top 5 team in 14 years. The Cougars have won 2 in a row in this series. And for Washington State, they rank 2nd nationally in passing offense and 20th nationally in scoring at 41 points per game. Oregon has a really good high-scoring offense with a balanced attack, but Justin Herbert, their starting quarterback, broke his collarbone last week. I think that matters in a game that will likely feature plenty of offense. I have Washington State winning outright. Moving ahead now to the game of the week. Still for the season, undefeated, picking the outright winner of the game of the week. And this week's edition, Michigan State heads into Ann Arbor to play the Michigan Wolverines. The Wolverines welcome the squad from East Lansing. Michigan, a 10.5-point home favorite, but they did open as a 13-point favorite, so it's obviously been moved down. Michigan won the matchup last year, but it was only by 9 points, and I do think that Michigan team last year, at least in terms of experience, was better than this Michigan team. Now, a lot of season left to play. Michigan can progress to be better, but so far, that doesn't quite bode well. Didn't quite blow Michigan State out last season. Also, the Spartans, coming in off of a nice home win against Iowa. Iowa hung with Penn State, but then lost to Michigan State on the road. For Sparty, their defense has been outstanding all season. They've allowed 247 yards a game, which does rank 4th in the country, and their run defense ranks 8th in the country. However, the issue for Sparty is their offense hasn't been consistent yet all season, and that's going to be a big problem in a game against the Michigan defense that's even better than Michigan State's. The Wolverine defense actually leads the nation in yards allowed per game. The key for Michigan here is going to be the play of John O'Korn, who will likely start in place of an injured Wilton Speight. O'Korn looked decent in fill-in time against Purdue the last time out. So that being said, Michigan, better defense statistically. John O'Korn looks better probably than Brian Lewerke to start the season. More higher rated recruits on Michigan. Jim Harbaugh getting that program rolling again, right? Michigan big. Wolverines by a few scores, right? Not so fast. Michigan State has covered 9 in a row in this series, and while I don't think they go into an Ann Arbor night game and win, night game's rare in Michigan, the crowd will be into it, these players will very much be into it. A young team probably feeds off the energy of a night game under the lights in the big house, but I don't think that's enough for them to cover 10.5. I like Michigan in this one, but only by 4.